The question is, do you agree that Scotland should be an independent country?
For me, the principle that we work best when we work together.
Well, they didn't.
Very serious. The referendum. It seems to me that they're not dealing with the issues.
Hello, this is the 100th podcast that we've put out, and I hope you've been enjoying them. This time I spoke to Alastair Hutchison, who, amongst other things, is heavily involved with Lib Dems for Indy and is a Heart supporter. We spoke about the Lib Dems for Indy group, we spoke about the Lib Dems, why they didn't form a coalition with the SNP at one point, and we spoke about Hearts and how the debate's going on amongst a group of supporters who include both George Foulkes and Alex Salmond. Something not right there. So yeah, I'll go straight to the conversation and I'll have a wee word with you at the end. Hello, Alastair, how's it going?
Not too badly, Michael.
Alastair, you're from Lib Dems for Indy. What was the inspiration behind Lib Dems for Indy?
Well, it's a long story. It started off way back, I would say, in 2005 was its beginnings. I was working for the Lib Dems back then, and I was at the general election count in Edinburgh at Meadowbank, and a next door neighbour, strange enough, of my parents was there, and he was an SNP member, and we had a little chat, and I put him in his place and told him his folly of supporting the SNP and how the Liberal Democrats were really, where it should be at. Fast forward to last year, he started following me on Twitter, and he noticed that my tweets were, shall we say, maybe not pro-independence, but certainly questioning the union and the campaign and the press and the media behind unionist side, shall we say, the Better Together side. It wasn't quite named that at the time. So he sent me an email asking if I was interested in, or did I know of any other Lib Dems who felt this way? Should I set up a group, that kind of thing? And I rejected it, saying I wasn't involved with the party anymore, wasn't a member anymore, that kind of thing. I'm not really the person to be doing this. But then I had a sort of little think and thought, well, why not? It doesn't have to be, a group like Labour for Indy. It can easily be sort of a forum for people who have voted Liberal Democrat in the past but are feeling maybe disgruntled with the party, maybe feel that independence is not such a bad idea, but are looking for more answers. I know it's a bit of a cliched thing there, obviously wanting answers, but people who just don't have this, shall we say, Willie Rennie-esque no, never. Well, let's actually talk about it. Let's have a debate about it. So that was kind of the idea behind it. And as time has gone on, I've become very much more in favour of independence, shall we say.
Has there been any kind of opposition from within the Lib Dem party?
No one has objected. I'm sure there's probably people who don't like it. On the page itself, we've got people who have stood as candidates who contribute to the page and talk quite openly about their support of independence. We also have a few people like councillors or ex-councillors, people who stood for council election who are not so in favour, but they talk, that kind of thing. There's obviously a lot of pro-independence people from no parties and other parties who come on and talk as well, and I have no objection to that. But there's not been any direct criticism. As you say, we haven't got a massive profile. It's very much word of mouth and a forum. We've not got a network of activists around the place, even though we are asked to give talks in various places, and we're going to start trying to step that up in 2014 as we get closer to the votes.
The Liberal Democrats have had a plan for a while of a more federal Britain. And when I read that plan, the first thing that sort of came to mind was, well, why not just go that one step further? If you want to completely federalise the United Kingdom, what's the purpose of actually keeping it together? Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's a fair point. I would say the Lib Dems and the Liberal Party before it were always in favour of home rule, whether that be Ireland or Scotland. And the idea of home rule or federalism, I think, is kind of stay rigid, if that makes any sense. Whereas the world has changed. So I think the idea of what federalism meant in the 1970s, 80s, even I would say probably into the late 1990s, is very different to what federalism or what it would mean now. The world is closer together. Europe is becoming closer, whether UKIP like that or not. Europe is becoming closer together. Countries rely on each other more and more and more. No country can genuinely survive without its neighbours and its friends. And the USA doesn't do that. Not even North Korea does that. So in my mind, federalism isn't that different to independence. Europe is moving towards having sort of greater defence, or joint defence forces, that kind of thing. Certainly greater financial controls over each other, regulations, that kind of stuff. We would be part of that. The remainder of the United Kingdom would be part of that. These things would still be joined together. It's not a case of an independent Scotland would be stuck in the middle of the Atlantic as often is painted. We would still be part of the international community, the European community, a new United Kingdom, as it were, or a new version of the United Kingdom. So I don't think the two ideas are miles apart now. Maybe once upon a time they were, but now they're more or less the same thing, as you say. That's my opinion. I think, as a Liberal Democrat, what I sort of think of politically fits in much more, or is much more realistic to happen in independent Scotland than within the United Kingdom, its present state.
So there's Westminster's very neoliberal place at the moment, and you think that more social democratic values are more likely to come in an independent Scotland, or is that an unfair assumption?
No, I think that is fair. The Liberal Democrats are in government at the moment. We are the government, yet nothing that I can think of the top of my head that I stand for, and the reason I have voted Liberal Democrat my whole life, is happening, if that makes any sense. Things like, I'm a Liberal Democrat, therefore I am against nuclear weapons. I'm a Liberal Democrat, therefore I believe in federalism. I believe in closer ties with Europe. These kind of things are the reason I vote Liberal Democrat. None of that seems to happen. I believe in free education, or a health service, free at the point of service, that kind of thing. A welfare state that is there for people who require it.
We often talk about splits in different parties. There's a more social democratic wing of the Lib Dems, there's a more neoliberal wing of the Lib Dems, there's a more social democratic wing of the SNP, there's a more neoliberal wing of the SNP, the same goes for Labour, and there's an insane wing of the Tory and a more insane wing of the Tory party. So do you think that, obviously the neoliberal wing of the Liberal Democratic Party is in power in London, or they would be objecting to things more?
No, I agree with that. The party has been hijacked, I would say, by Nick Clegg, Danny Alexander, David Laws to a certain extent as well, and it's very much the right wing of the party that is in charge. I haven't changed. My political views haven't changed. It seems the party has changed. Yet the people that I know that are within the party haven't changed. So, are we just riding this out and hoping that eventually, it'll all change, we'll go back to being normal? Now, that may be the case, but the people who vote Liberal Democrat won't forget for a long time. So we've got to do something. We've got to be proactive in trying to wrestle control of the party back, shall we say.
So it's not something that you necessarily agree with within that party, but just with that federalist plan, and then we've talked about just moving it over to independence a little bit. Do you think it's some kind of strange emotional ties that are stopping people from making that little step over? What is it that stops people in the Lib Dem party from going from, okay, there's the federalist bit, why not just go to independence?
Well, if I knew that, I would put it on the website, that's for sure. I don't think it's an emotional attachment. The Lib Dems have never been, we're not like the Conservatives in terms of, as you say, waving the Union Jack, that kind of thing. And there's an element of that in the Labour Party as well. Certainly one that they're trying to project media-wise even more. The Lib Dems never really been about flag waving of any colour, as it were. And I think that's what I've got to try to get across. That for people who vote Liberal Democrat, or certainly voted Liberal Democrat, shall say up to 2010, the idea of independence, it's not about flags, it's not about not liking England, it's not about that kind of thing at all. It's about what is best for Scotland. And if you believe in the kind of things you've been voting for, the kind of things Liberal Democrats have been standing for, do you really believe that's more likely in an independent Scotland, or do you believe that's more likely in the United Kingdom? And to me, it's a no-brainer. It's going to happen in independent Scotland. It's very unlikely to happen in the United Kingdom because we're in government at the moment and it's not happening. So,
in all of the United Kingdom, the Liberal Democrat votes dwindled on account of Clegg and that cabal in the party. But do you think there's any way that they can come back? Is that what you're trying to do, to help them to come back to some kind of popularity?
No, it's not. It's not about. I mean, I mentioned before about wrestling control, sort of the party back. It's not about trying to sort of form some sort of coup d'état from the side. It's not going to happen like that. But what I'm trying to get across is, in 2010, there were something like 400,000 people in Scotland voted Liberal Democrat. Now that does not mean that they class themselves as Liberal Democrat. They certainly class themselves enough or believe in what Liberal Democrats are saying enough to go to a box, to go to a voting booth and put an X in a box kind of thing. We've got to get to these people and say, look, independence, what you believed in 2010 and what you voted for and what the reason you voted for Charles Kennedy before that and even back to Paddy Ashdown before that, these kind of things that you voted for can happen in independent Scotland. And it's more likely to happen in independent Scotland. I don't think people believe it, if that makes any sense. I don't think they've quite made the connection. There's still, unfortunately, this idea that it's just all about wearing kilts and shortbread and the mantra of we're too poor, it just wouldn't happen. And it's like, well, that just isn't the case. All it takes is a little bit of research and a little bit of knowledge and find out it can happen. Now, I'm not going to say it's guaranteed to be a fantastic success, but I also can't guarantee in the next 5 years that the United Kingdom is going to be a fantastic success. I mean, you can't tell what the future is going to be like, but what you can say is it's something more likely to happen in one case or the other, and it's definitely, in my opinion, more likely to happen in independent Scotland.
Do you think that discussion, the shortbread and kilts, happens more in the party down south? Because if you look at the media coverage, even in the broadsheets, the supposedly intellectual papers, they tend to suggest that down south that the discussion is all about tartan and kilts and shortbread and Braveheart and nationalists, although they tend to do it in a slightly more intellectual way. But they believe it's all about flag waving in a certain sense, although that's beginning to change. We're beginning to see that change. But that's not the discussion you see in Scotland. The discussion you see is about governance, about how can we change society. Do you think there's still that schism in the party? Because I've heard from people in Labour as well that they think that people down in London don't quite, or people in England or the south of England in particular, don't really understand what's going on.
Oh, no, definitely. All you have to do is listen to certain MPs talk, and you're aware of that. The point about sort of the media down south, The Guardian is the kind of newspaper which I read and I agree with 95% of what it says. It's if I lived in England, it would be the newspaper that I would buy. Then suddenly it turns into the Daily Mail when it is referring to Scotland. And certainly if you look on its message boards and its website, it's unbelievable. It's like, how can people who I agree with everything else they say put everything upside down and on its head? It's almost sticking their heads in the sand and not wanting to know what the real argument is about. In terms of politically, whether it's people, the media circus down south, MPs and the media alike, whether they're just sticking their heads in the sand, whether it is genuine ignorance, I just don't know. But it reminds me of, was it the 2011 Scottish elections? There was Caroline Flint, the Labour MP, was being grilled by the BBC political correspondent with the bald head, I've forgotten the name of at the moment, but he was asking her, basically saying it's a bit of a disaster for Labour up north. It's all going a bit wrong in Scotland, and she was just spouting out the tired mantra of, well, people in Scotland vote SNP because that's the way to get at Labour. It's because they don't like Labour, so they vote SNP because they know they don't like the Tories, that kind of thing. And I was like, that isn't why people are voting SNP. They're not voting SNP to kick Labour. People didn't leave the Liberal Democrats to vote SNP to kick Liberal. They did to kick Liberal Democrats a bit. But people voted SNP because they were saying what people agreed with the most. So they're still not understanding. There's still a thinking, I think, that the movement up here is a kind of a sort of a protest vote, almost, shall we say. And it's just the Scots getting a little bit sort of waving their sabres kind of thing. And as you say, it's not about that. When you talk to people in my social circle, people who I work with, there's people very pro-independence, there's people very anti-independence, but it's a much more sensible debate. Now, there's still misconceptions about, wealth, money, President Salmond, that kind of thing. There's still these kind of misconceptions, but it's a much more sensible adult debate than you get coming from London, unfortunately.
Yeah, and just to change tack a bit, have Lib Dems for Indy been involved or got in touch in a major way with